Welcome back, APUSH students. Today is chapter 21 of the American Pageant, titled The Furnace of Civil War. If you don't know the American Pageant, it's fine because the content is still going to be the same. I'm going to be going over all the key terms and notes for this chapter that helped me get a 5, so I encourage you to take notes along as well. George McClellan, General of the Union Army of the Potomac, I'm not sure. Although he was a smart military mind, he was overcautious, which created numerous problems for the Union, who needed to be on the offensive. If you've ever seen the oversimplified video on the Civil War, you know just how cautious and ineffective McClellan really was. Peninsula Campaign, Union offensive in Virginia. Although it was a Union defeat, the defeat prolonged the war, which caused Lincoln to pursue emancipation policies and the South to undergo more destruction and losses. So by extending the war, Lincoln had more time to gradually shift the purpose of the Civil War from resolving the Union to emancipation and abolitionism. Merrimack and Monitor, iron warships used in the Civil War. They were examples of the expanding naval technology used in the Civil War and spelled the end for wooden warships. It made the Battle of the Blockade more advanced. Remember that since the Industrial Revolution, there hasn't really been a war testing America's power, but the Civil War, we can really see how both sides, North and South of America, are using that technology to fight against each other. Emancipation Proclamation, Lincoln's proposal for abolition. It made the war about abolition, transferring it to a moral crusade, so it really tied the moral cause to the war. It also ended all hope for peace, as for the Emancipation Proclamation to come to fruition, the South would obviously have to be destroyed. 13th Amendment, Constitutional Amendment for abolition. It foreshadowed the ultimate end to slavery, which made the North and South fight more viciously because the South knew what would happen to the slavery if they lost. An important thing about the Emancipation Proclamation is that it actually only stated that slaves would be freed from the rebellious states, but the 13th Amendment enshrined it into the Constitution, which made it so that any state, regardless if they seceded or not, would outlaw slavery. 54th Massachusetts Regiment, all-black Union Army Regiment. It symbolizes how the Emancipation Proclamation influenced many blacks to join the war, which bolstered the Union military. Now, it's not so much a numbers game with how many blacks actually join the Union Army, but it's more about just the optics of having blacks fighting alongside the white Union soldiers for the abolitionist cause. Fredericksburg, General Burnside offensive in Virginia. It was a humiliating defeat for the Union Army, who suffered many casualties and made General Burnside give up his command of the army. So you can start to see how the Union Army, especially in the beginning, started to cycle through commanders and leadership. Gettysburg, battle in Pennsylvania. It was a long and large battle, but the Union Army eventually came out on top. This loss spelled the end for the Confederate cause for victory or peace, although spirited fighting continued on. This obviously led to the Gettysburg Address. Gettysburg Address, speech made by Lincoln at Gettysburg Cemetery. Although his remarks were not revered at the time, his words became a famous symbol of his nobility. You will definitely read the Gettysburg Address sometime in your APUSH class. If you don't, you should definitely read it on your own because it is a really powerful document. Ulysses S. Grant, General of Union Army and future President. His military experience made him one of the greatest military generals of the time, and he led many successful campaigns that ensured the Union victory. Shiloh, battle in the Western Sphere. The Confederacy showed an impressive performance, although they lost, showing that there would be no quick end to the war despite Union successes. This is an example of the sporadic fighting that happened after the Battle of Gettysburg. Vicksburg, Confederate fort in Mississippi. It was a vital pathway for Confederate supplies coming from the west and became an essential point of attack for the Union forces to destroy the Confederate Army. Sherman's March, Union March through Georgia. Sherman pursued the total war strategy where he not only attacked the enemy military but also homes, cities, and valuable items. His tactics ruined Southern morale, increased deserters, and led to a quicker end to the war. So this was a show of Northern power and Northern domination over the ruined South. Congressional Committee on the Conduct of War, Committee against Presidential Expansion during wartime. It ran against Lincoln's pursuit of more radical wartime policies, which plagued some of his efforts to bolster control. If you remember back to the previous chapter, Lincoln was definitely showing some authoritarianism, not like he was a totalitarian dictator, but he was definitely expanding the executive power during wartime. Copperheads, Northern Democratic faction against war. They were outspoken against the war, emancipation, and any efforts by Lincoln to exert control and bolster support for the Union Army. They made the border states harder for Lincoln to possess. Even though the Republican Party definitely had a sectional control over the North, there was still a population in the North that were not in favor of the Civil War or any abolitionist cause. The Man Without a Country, story about a man exiled from the United States. It showed the negative effects on what disunion would have on the people, which made people more devoted to the Union cause. Basically, developing a world where the Union was not reconsolidated and that there existed a North and South. There consisted, the United States and the Confederacy, and it was not a good world for the mankind to live in. Union Party, Republican Party supporting war. It helped to expand the Republican Party to war-supportive Democrats, which united the Republican Party against the divided Democratic Party. This was definitely a huge Republican effort to consolidate the people in the South who supported the Civil War and supported abolitionism, which just expanded the Republican Party. Election of 1864, Lincoln wins re-election. It was a victory for the Republican Party and therefore spelled the end for any Democratic success in the North. The South faced the most crushing defeat as any potential political success in the North was ruined. So if the South were not able to win the war militarily, they could try and infiltrate the political scene up in the North, but obviously that was not going to happen. Wilderness Campaign, bloody Northern assault on Virginia. The casualties the North faced called Grant's leadership into question, but the North's advantages in numbers made it so they could win despite bloody battles. Appomattox Courthouse, site of the Southern surrender to the North. The South accepted the North's terms for surrender and the Civil War was over. This was the symbolic end of the Civil War. John Wilkes Booth, murder of Abraham Lincoln. His death helped to get rid of all the shortcomings of his presidency and helped to turn Lincoln into a martyr. His death was perfectly timed to the moment. Although obviously it is not good for a president to be assassinated, it definitely helped Lincoln's legacy, and it also helped in the moment to have someone dying for the cause on the national stage to really show that moral side of abolitionism. Reform Bill of 1867, British Bill for Democracy. It showed how the Civil War's expression of successful democracy influenced democratic expansion in foreign nations like Britain. So basically, even though America was consumed by a civil war, it really showed how the democratic processes won in the end, where the moral side, the good side against slavery, came out on top, and that influenced other nations around the world. The lost cause, the idea that the South lost, but they won't stop fighting for their cause of white supremacy. Although the South lost, it doesn't mean they don't have other methods consisting within the Union at attempting to achieve white supremacy. Obviously, even though they lost the war, it's not like the racism all throughout the South is just gone. It will shape Southern behavior for the Reconstruction years and beyond that to Jim Crow and things like that. And that's a wrap. Thanks for watching. I'll see you in the next chapter, and goodbye.